Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the official launch of the Northwood Leadership Foundation.
You don't choose student council, it chooses you.
I was involved in a lot of clubs in high school, but there was not a club that I really wanted to work hard for. There was not a club where I was passionate about up until I got involved in student council.
Leadership Foundation is to ensure that if a young person has a desire to attend, a clinic or a weekend or Mars Hill, or if they have that ambition, we have got to foster that. That can't not be snuffed out by their inability to raise the funds necessary. That there has to be an exclamation point behind it. They have to feel empowered, and we've got to get them there. Because if life actually is mostly about showing up, they got to be there.
My name is Henry Faust, and for 35 years, I served as the lead student council advisor at Northwood High. Over the years, this organization has grown into a very stable and effective part of this school. And we can attribute much of that growth to the training the students and advisors have received at various leadership conferences, conventions, and workshops. Scores of students have traveled all over the state of North Carolina and to many parts of the country in order to take advantage of these experiences. This training has allowed them to execute meaningful activities directed at all the students at this school.
I, for one, had to learn how to really lead projects. I had to learn how to speak up for myself. I had to learn how to plan out things which I wasn't really good at before. But because I learned these skills in student council, actually coming into UNC, I was able to hold or plan out one of the biggest Latinx events to occur at UNC called Carnaval.
The people that I met while I traveled with student council, we learned how to network and lean on each other and use each other as sounding boards or for ideas or bouncing things off of. And that now is still a skill that I use every day in my job now.
I think it really taught me how to operate in a professional realm, definitely with attending conferences and workshops that instilled the passion of networking. And I think just implementing projects taught implementation and optimization, but I think also on a personal level, it helped to shape what I want my projected career to be.
Through council, I learned that I had a love of travel, like a desire for travel that I may have never known about. And like you were saying, like the experiences, you don't know what you don't know until you go out and experience it, to get out and see it, get out and put your hands on it. That is and I have to say that council is where I got that love from.
For almost all of those years at Northwood, I've had the pleasure of having an ongoing conversation with my first president, Ronald Klaus, in which I would update him on council activities. During one of those talks, I explained the challenges of making sure we had enough money for students to travel to events without it being a burden. Many times we use most of the money in our account and/or students have to foot the entire bill. Ronald listened and finally replied, "Ask us for money." I thought and probably said, "What? Ask who for money?" He went on to explain how institutions regularly ask alumni to give donations to support their work. This was not news to me, however, I had never thought to apply it to Northwood High Student Council. And so we did. Sporadically, I and eventually either the executive treasurer or president would write an update of the council's most recent activities and accomplishments and send it to the alumni members. Then we would offer the opportunity for them to support the council's training events. Some years we collected a few $100s. Some years we would get a little over 1,000. Regardless of the amount, we appreciated it immensely.
Every other major organization has a booster club. You've got funding, and it's obvious why you need a booster club for band and for football, right? You've got all these instruments and helmets and uniforms and trips and all this kind of stuff, and that's obvious. And yet student council sits there quietly and people assume that, well, you've got a few chairs and a table in a room, that's all you really need. But the minute you start to try to reach out and meet other people and go to workshops and clinics and state meetings, the bills start mounting up.
Fast forwarded to a few years ago when Tyler Mason invited me out for breakfast at Elmo's in Carrboro. He had an idea. How could we set up something that would ensure that no student council member would have to forego attending a workshop training event because of lack of funds? We talked a few more times and eventually decided to investigate setting up a nonprofit foundation. I had worked with several such organizations over the years, but had never really had any kind of in-depth experience. Tyler fortunately had a connection with the Duke Law School and found out that third-year students had to do a pro bono project for a nonprofit. They matched us with law student John Valletta, who guided us through all of the paperwork necessary to establish a nonprofit organization. We also quickly pulled in Ron because, well, who else would you get to win a task with this magnitude? We followed John's directions, and in a relatively short time, we had approval from the Secretary of State of North Carolina for our designation as a 501c3.
I played football all 4 years, and I love football. I'm not my little brother coaches football. We love football, but football is a game, and it is entertainment. And what is done here, and what I felt like as a young person I was receiving from my participation with this organization, with the council, was a deeper meaning and a more fulfilling experience.
I think, Ron, you mentioned a very good point about doing that sort of like internal networking and getting people part of the organization. And I think while we all love Faust and this impact that he's had on us, this needs to be something outside of just Faust.
We started building our alumni database, discussed next steps in the organization, and set up our bank account at First Citizens with PayPal as our digital portal. We still have to develop our organizational structure further and more clearly determine funding priorities and processes, but we knew that at some point we had to make our official announcement and invite others to officially join us. That brings us to today.
The council is very, in my opinion, is very similar to a familial experience. So in a family, here you are, you come into the world, and you're kind of bound to this kinship with these other human beings. And so inside that box, y'all got to figure out how we're going to make this work. And an elected position on the council is very much like that. You are not surrounded with people that are replicas of yourself. You are surrounded with a diverse group of human beings with different talents and abilities and different attitudes, and they really just might not like what it is that you are just so proud of and assured of or confident in. And the council and very much life later demands that we find a way to work together, because we don't all have to love it, but we do have to get it done. I remember like my sophomore year, I don't think there was a single executive officer that I had much more in common with than we were there. And it ended up being a great year.
For me, a basic definition of leadership is it is how projects get done. Other things getting done is just a matter of life skills or just having skills. But projects, which involve lots of different people, different schedules, time frames, moving parts, projects cannot happen without leadership.
In that time, I realized that I could do one of two things. I could either choose to still be involved with student government and still contribute however I could, or I could just choose to leave and not learn from that lesson. And I think what that lesson truly taught me is that leadership doesn't have to be someone who's at the forefront of those conversations, at the forefront of those decisions, and it can really be someone who's working in the background and working to operate everything that's going on.
But it turns out that if everyone is just a worker bee, and they do precisely what they're asked to do and nothing more, and they can't see the vision, and they don't do anything, they don't have any independent thinking, it's a nightmare. Right. And so it's great to have people, even in the worker bee position, who have leadership skills.
I also learned how to organize a group of people to do things that they didn't necessarily want to do for the betterment of others, and I use that every day in my current job.
You didn't know you had it in you, but you came to a decision point where either I do something and I start organizing this, or it doesn't happen. It was so much stuff to decide, and it was fun to be at the center of those decisions, rather than being an observer or sort of the victim of other people's decisions.
I think one thing that our student council excelled at was the sheer volume of activities and projects that we implemented. But I think that on the flip side of that, the presence wasn't known. And I think one thing that we definitely struggled with was branding. I think that a lot of students recognized that there were a lot of events that were going on. They just didn't know that the student council was the organization that was doing them. So I think that was one area that we struggled on. And I think another one was effectively teaching project management. I think that during the course of the year, we were able to develop those skills, but it just took a little bit longer to really hit the ground running with project management. So that, I guess, like beginning period was pretty difficult to navigate.
Yeah, the planning was usually taking the most part of the year, since nobody really knew how to start these projects. So we actually had to walk them through, talk with them. I, for one, was very new to planning, so I also had to learn along the way, which I was thankful for, the conferences, the workshops, the summer that we all connected That was like the main starting point. And then over the year, the beginning of the year was where we were really trying to get these things down. And then people learn along the way. And I think the one thing we were really good at is at the end we were able to pull it off, which is like the main point.
I think the thing we missed, to sum it up, is I like the idea of attraction rather than promotion. And I think the council, earlier we were saying that it chooses you, in some ways. But if you're going to